Good evening or good morning wherever you are in the world. I'm Danisha Rajendran and I'm moderating the 11th YouTube session of the 7th International Women's Day edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 13 award-winning best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. We'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later in this session. You can also find more about the Pixel Project by visiting www.thepixelproject.net. But first, today, we have a very special guest with us, the fabulous mystery and crime author, Leigh Perry, who writes the Family Skeleton series for Berkeley Prime Crime. Leigh Perry is the pen name of the author Tony L.P. Kellner, who is the author of 11 mystery novels, 8 Laura Fleming mysteries, and 3 Where Are They Now mysteries. She is also the author of numerous short stories and co-edits best-selling urban fantasy anthologies with Charlaine Harris. She has won the Agatha Award and an RT Book Club Lifetime Achievement Award and has been nominated multiple times for the Anthony, the McCavity, and the Derringer. Leigh has also generously donated a couple of awesome treats to the stash of author goodies we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. The first goodie bundle is Leigh Perry's Family Skeleton Goodie Bundle. So this is available for US donors only. Leigh is offering a whimsical bumper bundle of skeleton-themed treats featuring books and goodies from her criminally good Family Skeleton series for one US donor. The goodie bundle features 2 Family Skeleton paperback books, The Skeleton Paints a Picture and The Skeleton Makes a Friend, signed and personalized, 2 skeleton kitchen towels, 1 skeleton patterned bandana, 1 skeleton drinking straw, 1 skull guest soap, 2 skull bracelets, a dapper skeleton nightlight or scent diffuser with scent, 1 skeleton Family Skeleton microfiber wipe for glasses or touch screens, and a skeleton crew button. So whether you are a longtime fan of Leigh and her books, or have a mystery living friend whose birthday is coming up, this is a great way to get a really fabulous set of goodies from Leigh while donating to support the cause to end violence against women and girls. So there is only one of this fabulous bundle available, and it's first come, first served. So grab it as quickly as you can. The second goodie bundle is Leigh Perry will critique your work in progress. This is available for donors worldwide. So this is specifically available also to aspiring authors everywhere if you're looking for some expert feedback from an award-winning author who is equally at home with mystery or crime and dark fantasy genres. Look no further. Leigh is offering a chance for one generous donor to have their work in progress critiqued by her. This opportunity includes a written critique of 10,000 words of your work in progress. This can be either from a novel or a short story. A maximum of 5 follow-up questions sent over 2 emails after Leigh has sent you her critique. There is just one of this critique bundle available, so donate now to book the slot with Leigh before it's gone. Please note that this is available to English language works only. So far, we've raised $3,220 towards our $5,000 goal, which is our slowest fundraiser yet. So please give generously before the fundraiser ends on the 15th of April, 2021. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. If you're just watching this session on YouTube right now, you will also be able to ask Leigh questions live. Just make sure you're logged into your YouTube account so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the YouTube screen, and Xiaoqin, who is today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to be read out to Leigh. Now over to Leigh to read for Welcome to Read for Pixels. What will you be reading for us today?
It's the first part of a short story called Bible Belt. I grew up in North Carolina, and that section of the United States is often kind of mockingly called the Bible Belt. So this is kind of a play on words with that. It was originally published in Ellery Queen's History magazine some years ago. I can't remember exactly how long ago. It was actually written as Toni Kellner as opposed to when I switched to Leigh Perry. Shall I go ahead and start?
Yes.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready. Yeah.
All right. So we'll just start with Bible Belt then. Be prepared. I'm going to go Southern for this because I am a Southerner, a Southern North Carolina. Bible Belt. It took Wynette a while to find the 10 Commandments in the Bible that Reverend Sweeney had left for her to read while she was in the hospital. She thought they'd be marked, but they were just stuck in with the other verses. Finally, she found them in the book of Exodus. There were commandments about stealing and killing and coveting, but nothing against hitting your wife. There's nothing about doing other things to your wife either. Wynette found the commandment about adultery, but that was just for people who weren't married. With Duke being her husband, it must be okay with God for him to throw her onto the bed and do whatever he wanted. If it wasn't, he'd have made a commandment against it. The next chapter had all kinds of other rules, and she read them too. They weren't commandments exactly, but since they were in the Bible, they must be God's will. There was a lot about smiting men and neighbors, mothers and fathers, and even servants, but nothing about smiting wives. She'd have thought that a wife would be more important than a servant, but maybe God didn't see it that way. Then Wynette found something about how you shouldn't make a woman miscarry, but when she read the rest of the verse, she saw it only count as if it was another man's wife. Did that mean that God didn't mind that Duke had made her miscarry his own child? Could it fit under killing? Reverend Sweeney said abortion was murder, that just because a baby wasn't born yet didn't mean he wasn't a baby, or she. Dr. Patel hadn't told her which hers was. It was probably too little for him to tell. Anyway, Wynette knew from her cousin that an abortion didn't hurt nearly as much as Duke hitting her in the stomach had. Duke had told Dr. Patel he hadn't known she was pregnant, even though he had. So wasn't that bearing false witness? But the Bible only said you couldn't bear false witness against your neighbor. Nothing against bearing false witness against your wife. Of course, Wynette had gone to Sunday school enough to know that neighbor in the Bible wasn't the same as a neighbor who lived next door to you. Love thy neighbor was supposed to apply to everybody, but maybe God didn't care what men did to their wives. It seemed to Wynette that if he did, he'd have stopped Duke a long time ago. If not the first time he slapped her, then later on when it got bad. Why hadn't God done something when Duke hit her so hard she lost a tooth, or the time he cracked her ribs? She tried to read more, but all the talk about oxen and feasts confused her because the print was awfully small and her head was spinning from the medicine they'd given her. Besides, it didn't look as if God had anything to say about her. That seemed funny because she'd gone to church every week until she got married. Then she had to quit because Duke went out on Saturday nights, and it bothered him for her to take a shower and get dressed the next morning. Now when she woke up on Sunday, she'd lie in the bed waiting for him to stir before she got up. Sometimes she had to pee so bad it hurt, but she could stand that a whole lot easier than she could stand what a hungover Duke would do to her if he were woken early. Wynette carefully closed the Bible and put it onto the nightstand next to the bed. She wasn't sure if Reverend Sweetie had been giving it to her or only loaning it, so she wanted to make sure to take care of it. She looked for the TV control, but it was out of her reach. She didn't think Duke had put it there on purpose because it would have been easier for him not to rent the TV for her in the first place. He was always nice to her when she was in the hospital. She thought about calling a nurse to get her the control, but the nurses must have more important things to do than worry about her. The hospital was filled with sick people, and Wynette wasn't really sick. The doctor had said she should still be able to carry a baby, only next time she'd make sure Duke was ready to start a family. Wynette had expected her husband to be as excited as she was about the news. She'd be in the bedroom putting on makeup when Duke got home from work, because it was Friday night, and she thought sure he'd want to go out to celebrate. Before she could tell him, he started in on her because she'd forgotten to get more beer. He'd hit her once or maybe twice before she could say anything, and then she'd blurted it out, not at all the way she'd planned, just to make him stop. only it didn't make him stop. Hearing about the baby just made him madder. By the time Duke had quit hurting her, their baby was dead. Now Lynette knew she was going to have to make sure that she didn't get pregnant again until Duke said it was okay. The thing was, he wouldn't use a rubber. Birth control pills cost money, and Duke wasn't the type to pay attention to a calendar when he was in the mood. Maybe she could get a diaphragm. Her sister Lynn didn't use hers anymore, so Lynette could borrow it and it wouldn't cost Duke a thing. There was a tap at her door, and Lynette looked up and saw Belva Tucker. Hey, Lynette. Hey, Belva. Belva came in and pulled out one of the chairs and pulled it over close to the bed so they could talk without Lynette having to hold her head up. Belva was always thoughtful that way. Some people thought she wasn't gentle the way a woman should be because of her being one of Rocky Shoal's deputies, but Lynette knew better. Belva always came to see her when she was in the hospital. Most times she brought candy or a magazine or even flowers. Belva must have remembered that too, because she said, "I'm embarrassed I don't have anything for you. I came to see Dr. Patel, and I didn't even know you were here till he mentioned it. I'm awfully sorry about the baby." "That's all right, Belva. It's probably because for the best." "You mean because of Duke?" Belva asked, and Lynette could tell that her friend was mad. "Of course not," Lynette said quickly, not wanting Belva mad at her. "I just mean that there must have been something wrong with the baby, or God wouldn't have taken him. Reverend Sweeney said God was being merciful." Belva didn't look as if she believed Lynette or Reverend Sweeney. "Is there anything I can get you?" "I don't need a thing, Belva. They're taking good care of me." "Well, they ought to. They see you enough." Before Lynette had a chance to respond, Belva added, "I bet you wouldn't turn down a bag of Hershey's Kisses." Lynette grinned and managed to keep from wincing, even though her mouth still hurt from where Duke had slapped her. "Belva, have you ever known me to turn down Hershey's Kisses?" "Then I'll bring you some tomorrow after church." "Aren't you sweet? But I might not be here that long. Dr. Patel says I might can go home in the morning." "That's all right. I'll find you," she said with a grin. Then she got that mad look again before saying, "Are you going to be needing a place to stay when you get out of here?" Lynette tried to pretend she didn't know what Belva meant. "Of course not. Duke will be here to take me home." Belva nodded and sighed a little, as if she were sad. Just to get her friend thinking about something else, Lynette said, "Are you still chasing after those hijackers?" "You know me, I never give up." For the tone of her voice, Lynette knew Belva wasn't just talking about hijackers. "That's why I'm up here, as a matter of fact. They found another trucker with his head bashed in this morning." "Is he going to be all right?" "He should recover, but it's going to be a few days before I can talk to him. There's no telling where those bastards will be by then." He politely added, "Pardon my French." That's all right, Lynette said. "Lord knows Duke said worse than that every day." And besides, she didn't blame Belva for cussing. For months, a band of hijackers had been tormenting truckers all up and down the highways in North Carolina, and they seemed to be centered around their area. According to the TV news, the whole state depended on the trucking industry, which Lynette hadn't realized before. So if truckers got scared and started taking jobs elsewhere, it could hurt everybody. And the truckers had every right to be afraid. One man had already been killed. "You'd think the truckers would stop picking up hitchhikers," Lynette said. This one didn't. They found him at a rest stop. It looks like he stopped to take a leak, and they jumped him in the John. From now on, I bet the truckers are going to be peeing in empty bottles rather than stopping anywhere around here. What was he carrying? Was it valuable? We're still trying to find out. The hijackers took all the paperwork along with the truck. It looks as if they're just hitting trucks at random anyway. They sell the loads for whatever they can get, strip the trucks of anything else worth selling, and dump the rest. She looked at her watch. "Well, I better be getting on. You call if you need anything." "Thanks, but Duke will be here later." Belva made a noise that was almost a snort as she got up from her chair. She was halfway out the door when she turned back and said, "Come to think of it, where was your husband last night?" "Duke? He was here with me." Once he'd realized how badly hurt she was, he'd driven her right to the hospital. "All night?" "Well, he went home at bedtime, of course." Lynette had hoped he'd come back that morning, since it was Saturday and he didn't have to work. But with Reverend and Sweeney and Belva visiting, she hadn't been too lonely. "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering." "Belva, you've been working too hard," Lynette said, trying to make it sound as if it were a joke. "You'll be seeing hijackers under the bed before long." She smiled as if she knew Belva was kidding. Belva didn't smile back. She just looked at her as if there was something she wanted to say. Then she put the TV control right back where Lynette could reach it before she left. And I think we've run to the time, so I think I'll stop there. That's about halfway through this.
That was okay. Yes, because everyone is saying that's actually a really sad, horrible story so far that we've heard. Okay, so moving on to our questions, our discussion for today.
Okay.
So, as both Leigh Perry and Tony L.P. Kellner, you have written many mystery and crime novels that feature curious, tough, independent, and complex female protagonists, such as Georgia Thackeray in the Family Skeleton series, Laura Fleming in the Laura Fleming series, and Tilda Harper in the Where Are They Now series. Who or what are your inspirations for your female characters?
When you go back to the Laura Fleming series, was a North Carolinian living in Massachusetts, part of a large extended family with some kind of eccentric relatives. This was based a lot on my background. I was from North Carolina, had moved up to Massachusetts. I worked in the computer industry. I was marrying an academic. I had a large family, extended family up around Hickory and Granite Falls in that part of North Carolina. And some people have described them as eccentric. Most people have described them as eccentric because some of them pretty much are. And I think I was homesick when I moved up here. And I was so homesick, I started writing about where I had left. I think, they say you can't go home again, but you can when you write about it. So that's where Laura came from. She was very much like me at that point, computer industry, except for I made her a computer programmer instead of a tech writer. And I did make her tall, which is I made her 5'2", and in my family that's tall. So, and I am not tall, so she was my idealized version. Then when I started the Tilda Harper series, it was I was trying to do something very different. So I made her single instead of married. I made her a Bostonian. I actually have her living in the same small town outside Boston I do on the North Shore, which is Malden, Massachusetts. And I made her what I pulled from her was, or what I pulled from myself for Tilda was a love of pop culture. So she's a fan of old TV shows and comic books and all that kind of geeky fun stuff. So the series was about her investigating people who had been famous in the past with those kinds of Where Are They Now stories. For Georgia, I went back to myself a little bit. I made her an academic again, but which I am not, but I've known people in academia a lot. And I gave her a daughter. My editor at the time, Ginger Buchanan, was saying that was a big fan of the Gilmore Girls, which is a TV show about a youngish mother and her daughter, and how we're so close together. She said, well, you should base the relationship of your daughter character and your mother character on that book and in that show. I said, that's such a terrific idea. I'm going to do that. I've never seen an episode of the Gilmore Girls. Don't tell Ginger. I probably should. But I did pull, she said, you make the daughter a science fiction manga anime nerd like your daughters. And so I pulled from that. So I think that someone, my friend Dana Cameron, who's done a reading for you guys or a panel for you guys, once said that all of our characters are pulled from ourselves, even the villains and the killers. So not to make you nervous or anything.
Just going back to the height issue, we're also very, very short, my family. So I understand the 5'2" being tall.
Yeah. My sister and I both claim being 5 foot, but I know I'm shorter than she is, so one of us is lying, and I'm afraid it's me.
So we have a comment from Juliana Spink Mills. This is from the reading that you read earlier. So she says, terrible, but also beautifully written and beautifully read.
Thank you, Juliana.
And also from our other viewer, a passage that expresses a beautiful sadness from Misty 306.
Thank you.
So going back to our questions, the mystery and crime genre has its share of female stereotypes and tropes, ranging from being fridged as a victim to motivate the male character to being the psychopath themselves. How do you work around or subvert such stereotypes to create female characters who have agency in dealing with the world around them, including situations that involve sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls?
Well, while it is absolutely true, there's a lot of not accurate and not certainly not flattering tropes towards women. Fortunately, in mystery, there's also some of the opposite. One of the biggest mystery series, of course, for most kids in America was Nancy Drew, who was a woman, and she was a young woman, and she had agency, and she had a roadster. If you go back old enough now, I think she's in a convertible because they keep updating them. And she went out and solved hundreds of mysteries in her series. So I think for that, I'm pulling a lot more from that. I'm pulling from Jessica Fletcher, who was in Murder She Wrote, and it was a woman character, and she was out there solving the mysteries. I try to avoid the really stupid tropes of fridging women and all that, but fortunately, I find in mystery there's just as much good to pull from, and there's just as many good female sleuths who are active and wonderful as there are the really bad ones. So I think and also these days the whole domestic suspense field, I think which is not something I write in, but I read in it. And there's a lot more very complex kinds of women characters I think are coming out.
Yeah, that's true. I think we're seeing more of an evolved, complex character. Yeah. Also, just to share Regina's comment, if anyone needs facts and stats about domestic violence during pregnancy, here's a resource from the World Health Organization. So, anybody who would like to check it out, please do so from the link. Moving on to our next question. Your books and stories definitely pass the Bechdel test. For example, your Family Skeleton series touches on everything from realistic relationships between women to issues that women face today, such as parenting as a single working mother, in fact. So, why do you think many authors, including mystery and crime authors, still have trouble writing stories that pass the Bechdel test, despite the fact that there are many more things that women talk about other than men?
I don't know. They're not paying attention. I grew up the very benefit of a kind of a matriarchal family, though I was a North Carolina Southern family, which certainly has the reputation for being very male chauvinistic. Not my family. My mother, I'm one of four girls. My mother was one of six. Um, Her mother was as tough as nails, and in almost every family group I can think of, it was, the women ruled the roost. So we lived in a very or grew up in a very matriarchal kind of place. So it always surprises me when people, if you're writing a character, why wouldn't it be a complex character? It's more interesting that way. And I have no idea why people make it so simplistic when they're writing woman characters and passing the Bechdel test. It's like, every once in a while, and you've probably seen these online, they'll do some phrases of men writing about women and how women must be always thinking about their breasts. I guarantee you, I don't think of mine that much. I mean, I've had them, but they haven't gone anywhere. Well, they sag. But, it's not something I think about every day, and I don't know why. It's like, do they think the men writers do they think of their parts all the time? I hope not. I just don't understand it, frankly. I really don't.
So, what can you suggest for writers who want to write female conversations and relationships realistically?
Base it on people you know, because people are not simple. And I don't mean, plug your Aunt Suzanne right in the middle of the book. You pull, um, my character Junior Norton in the Laura Fleming book. She's a female. She's the chief of police for a small town in North Carolina. And when I started to write the character, I couldn't come up with a way to create a male chief of police in this small town that just it sounds so hackneyed to me. I just couldn't do it. And I said, well, I'll just make her a woman instead. And it's like, boom, it changed everything. Sometimes if you feel like you're writing a character where it just sounds too cliched, change something radical. Switch genders, switch gender identity, switch race, switch something just to shake yourself up. It's just low hanging fruit to base every one of these characters. But that character was based a lot on my big sister Brenda. I say big sister, but she was actually shorter than me. But she's my older sister. Was my older sister. She's passed away now, sadly. But she's based very much on her. Yet she's also a different character. I pulled the strength and the sass and the height from Brenda. And if you pull things from real life, not all from the same person, it's going to be more complicated and it's not going to sound so much like a stereotype.
Yeah, I think that is actually really good advice.
Thank you.
So, your female characters are multifaceted women with agency. However, readers may perceive them as unlikable or trying too hard instead of lauding them as likable or admirable characters, as they would if your characters were men. So, when you write your books, do you ever feel pressured by gender and cultural expectations to make your female characters likable and relatable?
That's interesting. Generally, I want almost any time I do a main character, and I have done male main characters in short stories. Um, if I'm going to write a novel, I have to personally like the person to spend time with them. I think the closest I came to an unlikable main character in a novel would have been in the three book Where They Now series with Tilda, because she was a lot snarkier and a lot less. She was probably my least likable main character. But if I'm going to spend a whole year plus for every book, and then if it runs into a series, I could be spending a decade with the same character. I have to make them likable. I think that would still be true if I'm writing a male character. I've very rarely written an unlikable male character in a short story, and he's not a character I'm ever going to revisit because I don't want to spend time with him. Why would the audience want to? I'm not a big anti-hero fan.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, just to we all of us actually, some of the viewers have realized that Sid is in the background. Um,
Several actually,
yeah.
yes.
So yeah, okay. There are a wide variety of male characters in your books, ranging from the sexist and misogynistic to those who respect their female colleagues, friends, and associates as their equals. Do you think reframing how stories describe men away from hostile and toxic stereotypes and towards complexity and even vulnerability can be one of the ways mystery and crime writers can break away from toxic tropes that promote toxic masculinity and dehumanization of women in the genre?
I absolutely do. I think it's with anything so important is representation. Whether
Mhm.
you're representing, bisexuals or gender fluid or nice people or mean people, the more different kinds of characters you are trying to represent, the truer to life it's going to be. And I think people need models. I think people need to recognize that that you can have a man and a woman being friends without being in a love relationship. I mean, or being in a sexual kind of relationship. One of George's best friend, or her best friend is Sid, who's a skeleton, so he's kind of sex neutral. He's asexual. Um, but one of her other best friends is another male academic. And I've always had men friends, so I really didn't think anything about it. But I just feel like so often people see things in movies and TV shows over and over and over again, and you think, oh, that's how it's supposed to be. Well, if I'm going to be influencing people to how it's supposed to be, I'm going to put in my version of how it should be. And I think you should be friends with people of both genders or all three genders or however the number of genders end up as we learn more and more about the spectrum of gender identity. I think people should cross it all over the time to be friends. And I figure if I put it in my books, it'll be maybe an inspiration, maybe just a model, or maybe it's just wishful thinking.
No, I think it is an inspiration. Do you think that eventually the violent alpha male type character would phase out of mystery and crime books as cultures worldwide start kicking out toxic masculinity? Or do you think that it's one of those stereotypes that would stick around for much longer than expected?
It has been around for a long time so far. I think that a good writer can take even some of the standard trope of toxic masculinity and do
Mhm.
something good with them, even if it's just to have the character slowly learn that that's not the way to be. Um, there's always going to be lazy writers, and I think a lot of toxic masculinity writing is just lazy writing, fridging characters of any gender, of a character having no purpose other than to inspire or motivate your main character. It's sloppy writing. So there's always going to be sloppy writing.
Right.
I think it's getting better because I think people are calling them out on it more and
Mm-hmm.
are bored with it. So I think, a lot of in writing is with all media is something new and something interesting. I think people are bored with some of the old stuff. Because it wasn't realistic then, it's not realistic now.
That's right. So many people in the anti-violence against women movement say that male violence is the main, if not the root cause of violence against women and girls, and violence in general. How do you think stories like yours can help move this conversation forward in a constructive way?
That's a toughie, isn't it? I think when you make things personal, I mean, they always have those cases. There was a case a while back where there were a couple of men, and they were not in America, and I cannot remember which country they were in, but they were known for catcalling women on the streets. I mean, really rude, nasty stuff.
Hmm.
So they some as an experiment, a TV show, they identified them. They found out who they were. They went and spoke to their mothers. They did makeovers on their mothers, and then had their mothers dressed looking very different, walking down the street, and the guy started catcalling them. And the
Oh,
women would turn around, and it's like, I'm your mother. And it was like, yes, okay, there was a little bit of violence against men because they smacked them around a couple of times, which as a mother, I don't approve of corporal punishment, but I think I would find that hard to resist. And it was hard to disagree with them in this case. But, it made it personal. It's like, this wasn't just a woman, this was a mother, this was their mother. I think that when you make anything personal and you realize it's not just a woman, it's someone's mother, someone's sister, it's another person. Because I don't want to fall into that whole thing. It was Leigh Perry good. There's so much I don't want to fall into that thing is you should respect women because they're someone's mother. But at least it's a start. You should
yeah,
respect them because they're a person. And then once you know they're a mother, maybe it'll slowly trickle in. If they're a mother, maybe they're really a person too. But I feel like it's a wake up call, and I think that's a place to start is with the wake up calls.
right. I think Regina just mentioned that the social experiment was conducted in Lima, in Peru.
Ah, good. That sounds right.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting social experiment. I think that's smart as well. We also have a question from our audience,
Okay.
Misty306. Have you thought about writing a story that's strictly paranormal or mystery? Not too many authors can pull off genre blending.
I've done paranormal mysteries and I've done straight mysteries. I'm trying to think if I've done just a paranormal. I like writing mysteries because I like the structure. It's very much a something happens. You've got this middle part where you're talking to suspects, you're figuring out. You've got an ending. So I do gravitate towards that structure. But I've done mystery short stories that were a vampire finding out who was in their grave,
Mhm.
and someone who was raising up a zombie and trying to find out who killed the zombie. And the family skeleton mysteries, of course, are paranormal mysteries because
Yeah.
it's got a skeleton, walking, talking skeleton telling jokes. So I blend. I don't, and I have done straight mysteries, but I don't think I've done any straight paranormal. I like killing things. What can I say?
And we like reading about them. Thank you, Misty, for that question. Um, so just to move on, stories can be one of the most powerful ways of bringing about social change. So let's talk about writing and genre, which we actually just did. Books and stories in the mystery crime genre usually involve some kind of violence, including violence against women. Rape and sexual assault, or at least the threat of it, is something that is present in many mystery and crime novels and is often a major plot driver. Do you think consent is an issue that mystery and crime authors have started tackling successfully in the recent years?
Some authors are doing a great job, and some aren't. I remember a book I read, and I'm not going to name the author because that would be mean. And he was the character. It was a male character, and this young woman character was being rude to him, and he basically kind of grabbed her and threatened to spank her, and clearly, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I won't do that again." And clearly, this writer thought that that was appropriate behavior, and all I could think was, this woman probably thought he was going to rape her. This woman was scared to death, and he thinks, "Ha ha, now she won't be a brat." I never read that author's books again. He may be a lovely person and on one, but anybody who gets it that wrong, I don't want to read their books. Um, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a rant and I forget the question.
So yeah,
Yeah,
some authors get it right, and then some authors don't necessarily get
yeah,
tackling these issues well. Yeah.
I don't. The school of mysteries in which I mostly fit into is what they call the cozy or traditional mysteries, which are more
Hmm.
Agatha Christie and less Sam Spade.
Hmm.
There's not as much violence in general, and there's not as much sexual good, bad, or indifferent sex in general as there are in most other books. So in my section of the field, we don't. There's not as much there. As a writer, if I put it in, I want it to be for a purpose. I don't want it to be a knee jerk. There's a cliche with villains that in movies, if you want to show that the guy's a bad guy, you have him kick a dog, and it's like, aha, now you know he's a bad guy. And yeah, it works, but it's lazy and
Yeah.
it's cliche. And sometimes I think the rape and the violence is the same thing. It's lazy and it's a cliche. Do something if you're going to do it, make it authentic. In Charlene Harris's Lily Bard series, that the character is a survivor of a horrendous rape is central to the character, it's central to the books, and that is an excellent use of, an excellent and authentic use of talking about rape and violence against women. I feel like if I can't do something with it, if I can't say something with it, I'm not going to just throw it in there just to make people go say, "Oh, he's a bad guy. Look, he's raping a woman." It's like, well, yes, we know bad guys rape women. That's kind of a given. Um, I don't want to put anything in there unless I can add something to it. And that's why I haven't done a whole lot. I've been lucky enough not to experience a lot of this, so I don't put it in my books. And I think there's plenty of books that they don't put it in. And I think there's a lot of books when they do put it in, it's just for shock value. And it's sloppy, it's not helpful, and it's just tacky.
Agreed. Um, so on that, following from that, do you can you share some tips and suggestions for portraying female characters in mystery and crime books who have experienced rape or domestic violence or childhood sexual abuse without reducing them to the sum of their trauma?
Sadly, there is all too much. You can get it first person, probably from someone you know. And I'm
Mhm.
sorry to say that, but I suspect this is true of everyone. I believe at one point the study said that 1 out of 4 women in America had some kind of sexual assault. And I started to do the math among me and my best friends. Yep. I did this math about certain subgroups of my family. Yep. I could find very few subgroups that was not true of, that at least 1 in 4 of us had had that experience. So you talk to somebody who's had that experience. If you know someone, you can ask and feel you can, who is willing to talk to you about it. If not, there are so many, sadly, biographies and memoirs of women who have gone through these things. Do your research. If you're going to research the forensics, if you can research the kind of guns, you can research what it means to be an abuse victim. And there was another book written by a male author, and again, I won't name him because it's mean, but he had a character who was supposedly a a victim of domestic violence from her husband, and it was the least. And I'm like, I had read enough at that point, and this was some years back. And it's like, she doesn't act anything like any domestic violence victim I've ever read. I don't believe it. And it annoyed me that a lot of his stuff was meticulous research, but that he just went, I can just say she is. And then when she gets mad at him, she's going to punch him out and she'll be gotten rid of him. And it's like, yeah, no, sadly, that's not how it works. And it's like, do your research. There's no excuse for not doing it.
Research is key. In 2018, the Staunch Prize, an award set up to recognize crime and thriller novels without violence against women, was launched and faced criticism in major crime novelists like Val McDermid, who believe that as long as there is violence against women in the world, it should be reflected in fiction. What is your take on the idea that mystery and crime books can work without some form of violence against women? Do you think it's feasible given some of the long-standing genre conventions and tropes?
Oh, absolutely. Read a cozy. I mean, most cozies aren't violent in general. I mean, cozies tend to focus on the puzzle, and there might be there's generally a some kind of a dangerous moment or two, but not like some of the other types of things. But even though in my side of the field we tend to not do that, I do feel the danger of saying don't put it in because, as Val says, and she's a very good writer. I've read some of her work. Um, she's right, it is there. So it's, in some sense, you want to model a world that you want to exist, so without it. But the other sense, you want to show that if it exists, what do we do? And by putting it in her books, when the violence happens, she can tell you both what you can do to save yourself, what you can do to save other characters, or even just how characters act. To we need the education. So I don't want to say there shouldn't be. I was torn about that award. The idea of not putting it in. It's like by not putting it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Because there have been plenty of women with agency for years. The fact that they weren't put in books didn't mean they didn't exist. It was still happening. So I'm really very torn. But it's absolutely possible to do a book that does not include violence against women and still have a good book. I'm trying to think of one, and the one I first thought of was totally wrong, which was To Kill a Mockingbird. It's like, nope, yep, there's the violence against women in that. But there's plenty of excellent books that don't have it. A lot of the Dorothy Sayers books don't, for instance, to go back a few years.
Yeah, and that's right. What would you suggest to authors in this genre who are figuring out how to tackle the issue of violence against women without falling back on harmful stereotypes and tropes?
Again, just be a good writer, be observant, do research.
Yeah.
Anything that you're creating in any other kind of character, that's just another aspect of them. If you're going to write a character who's a candle maker, you learn about candle making. If you write about someone who's the survivor of domestic abuse, you learn about survivors of domestic abuse. It's not rocket science. That's why I'm always baffled when people don't do that research, that basic kind of research.
Agreed. How do you find a balance between showing violence as an integral part of the story and not showing violence gratuitously?
You can do an awful lot with implication and between paragraphs or between chapters. When I was doing the Laura Fleming books, which were a lot what they call a clean mystery, there wasn't much cussing, there wasn't much violence, there wasn't much sex. Even though the main character was married, there wasn't much sex on the page. It would just kind of a chapter would end and then it'd be the next day. And it's like, well, that was a lovely night. So when I started the Tilda, I always thought this was pictured as if your great Aunt Virginia were reading it out loud to your grandmother. And I say that because my great Aunt Virginia did indeed read my books out loud to my grandmother. There is no guaranteed way to make you not want to write a sex scene than to know that Grand Aunt Virginia is going to read it to Grandmama. So, but when I started the next series, and sadly my grandmother had passed away, I thought, well, I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna put it in. This character is gonna be single. She's gonna be sex positive. This is gonna be great. And somehow it ended. The chapter ended, and it was the next day. I don't know how that happened. I somehow missed the stuff in the middle. But you don't have to. And people who read it, they got the picture of what was going to happen sexually. The guy and the girl were going to go off and have a nice night together. It didn't have to be on the page. And I think violence can be done kind of the same way. There was a lovely description in, what was it? Again, my friend Charlene Harris's book about someone, her character Sookie had been beaten up. And it's a lovely description about how it was, rather than showing every bruise and every blow, it was just her description of how she felt afterward, that the body was really her body just felt like a bag of pain. And the sense of, that's what there was, what to me that was more impressive than showing the biff bam boom of her being beaten up, was how she felt the next day. And that you can do that with any of the kinds of violence. You don't have to show every single spot. You can show the effects on people. And it's the effects on people that are really the story anyway, not the mechanics.
Yeah, and I think the effects also kind of create that connection with the reader as well.
I think so too.
As a genre, mystery and crime seems to be very male-dominated, even though the late, great Agatha Christie is the biggest-selling author in the world today. Do you think this is changing as more women start writing in the genre?
Again, it depends on which side of the genre you're looking at. On the traditional cozy side, there are men who write under women's names because they can't get published as men. And Miranda James, who is a New York Times bestselling writer, the wonderful, what's the name of his sister? There's a wonderful series set around a library. It's actually meant by a guy named Dean, And he's written a couple different series under women's name because those books are mostly bought by women and they prefer a women's name. So that the cozy / traditional field is pretty much, gosh, I'd say 90% women. The darker and war stuff, yeah, it's mostly men, but then you get your Megan Abbotts and domestic suspense. You get your Gillian Flynn's and your Laura Lippmans. We're there. I think I don't know if you're familiar with Sisters in Crime. Sisters in Crime was it's a mystery organization dedicated to improving the field for women mystery writers. It started a long time ago by founding mothers included Sarah Paretsky, Marcia Muller, and Sue Grafton, who felt like at that time women's mysteries were not getting the same attention because they didn't get as many reviews, the sales didn't turn to be as good, the advances weren't as good. And so they wanted to make an effort to change that, because actually women were writing half the mysteries even then, and women were buying more than half the mysteries. So both buyers and writers were women. They just weren't getting the attention, which was crazy. So they started the review project, where they would monitor the reviews in places like Publishers Weekly and New York Times, and the major review venues at the time, and say, okay, we know that this many books came out last year in mystery. We know this percentage were by women and this percentage were by men. The reviews should reflect that. The reviews did not, in fact, reflect that. They skewed male. So they just started writing letters to those various venues and saying, how come? Why aren't you doing this? And started publicizing it, and the numbers went up. And so I think, I don't know that it's even yet, but it is better. So I think we're getting there. We're making progress.
Yeah, that does sound like a big move towards getting the change going and the ball rolling.
They talk about how people, feel themselves being victimized even when they're not. As soon as that started happening and Sisters in Crime started getting more women's books written, get a little more attention, it was still about 50-50 as far as whose books were selling, whose books were being published. But darned if I didn't start hearing from men writers like, well, now you have to be a woman to sell a book. And I just felt like, because you're not looking at the numbers, you're just feeling mad because you can't sell your book, and I sold mine. Yes, that actually happened to me. A guy, after we were both trying to sell our first books at the same time. Mine sold first. I hadn't seen him in a while. I saw him. I said, so how's it going? And he says, well, I can't sell my book. How's yours? I said, oh, I got a contract. He goes, well, yeah, you can get a book. You can sell a book if you're a woman now. He's never sold his book. Not that I hold a grudge.
Well, it sounds like he's a sore loser.
Yep.
Do you think there is a difference between how male authors and female authors in the genre handle rape, sexual assault, and consent?
You mean in their books?
Yes.
I hope you mean in your books.
Well, yeah, definitely in the books.
I think so. I'm trying to think of, because I'm writing in mystery, sometimes I tend to read other genres more. The idea of taking a busman's honeymoon, or busman's holiday, I guess. But I've seen more books where it was just handled really badly by men than I have by women. And I don't name names because I didn't get rid of their books, so I don't keep them, and I don't read any more by them. I hate to generalize that way, but I think it's handled a little bit better in books by women, just because it's something we have to face every day. And a lot of men are just learning, and they are learning, bless their hearts, but they got to catch up.
Yeah, agreed.
And you see some of the tropes in books by women because that's what we see on TV and that's what we see in the movies, and it just becomes internalized. It's embarrassing, but it does.
So, parents are usually the most influential role models in a person's life. As a mom, what do you think parents can do to help prevent violence against women and girls in future generations, and to get boys involved in helping to do so?
Well, I'm bad with this one because I've got 2 daughters. I'm one of 4. My mother's one of 6. We don't do boys. But I should probably brought my husband in for this one. I think just not putting up with it. As a woman, if your husband like is treating you poorly, and your son sees it, he's going to think that's the way to be. You can't put up with it. If you're a woman and your boss mistreats you and calls you silly names or whatever. I had a boss I was in a technical writing department. He tried to call the department, which happened to be all women, but he was in charge of it. Go figure. And he was like, "Oh well, the documentation girls," and it's like, dude, no, can you not say that? And it's kind of that. Yeah, if you don't have boys, excuse me, if you have boys, you need to speak up. And I hate to put that another burden on women because Lord knows we have plenty, but you have to speak up and let them know that it's not acceptable. You can't let them treat you that way because then the boys will think it's all right to treat all women that way. So I think that's one of the best things we can do.
Yeah, oh, that's a short and sweet answer. I like that. So the next cluster of our questions, it's actually a very obvious set of questions, but we ask all our Read for Pixels author this. You have been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. So why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
Remember I mentioned the statistic about 1 in 4 women and how
Yeah.
I'm 1 of 4 girls, and it rang true for us. And me and my 3 best friends, it rings true for us. Well, I've got 2 daughters. I don't want it to ring true for them. And they're both, and so it's like, I mean, even if it weren't important for me on a personal, selfish level, it would be important as a mother. It's like, no, I hated when I had to tell my daughters, when you go to a college party, don't leave your drink unattended. I hated having to tell them that, but I felt like I had to. I want us to be a world where we don't have to tell our kids that.
That's
So it's
very
purely,
real.
Everything goes down to the personal level, and it's like, I've got too many friends. I've got women friends who've gone through this. I've got kids, and it shouldn't be this way. And this is going to do a little bit to help that maybe it won't be this way forever. Then it's worth the effort. It's worth a lot of effort.
So on that note, what do you think authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
Pass the Bechdel test. Learn what the Bechdel test is. My daughter actually goes to the school where Bechdel graduated. She went to Oberlin. So they talk a lot about the Bechdel test there. Just think, if you're a good writer, okay, think of it purely from I'll go for a different approach. Go for a purely marketing approach. If you're only writing books for men and for the kinds of things that men think are appropriate characters, you're missing more than half your audience because more than half the books in this country are bought by women. So think about your audience, guys. Make some money. But I think that by talk about the effects of sexual abuse and violence, and that's a problem with mystery series. And I share this truth because you're writing a character. Most of us do not encounter many dead bodies in our lives other than at funerals, and I'm fine with that. But in our books, they approach these dangerous situations and murders book after book after book in a long-running series, and that's going to affect people. So write about the effects it has on people. Don't just laugh it off. Don't just say, well, yes, he was beat up last book, but he's okay now. No, he's traumatized. Well, yeah, she was raped a couple of books ago, but she's fine now. It's like, no, she's traumatized. Right? If you write about the effects, I think that's going to hit home and make for better characters and better books.
That's a good point. So actually, I think some of our viewers have noticed Anisha Kandasivams mentioned that we can see Leigh's husband waving in the background.
Wait, Steve. Yeah. He left the room when I was reading Bible Belt because he finds that story so it tears him up. He can't listen to me read that one.
I know it is a really horrible one, but very well written.
Thank you.
So thank you again, Leigh, for answering all of our questions and being here with us today. Just to go through again our goodies, Leigh has generously donated a couple of awesome treats to the stash of author goodies. So we have this on our Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. The first goodie, for those of you who missed the beginning part of the session, is actually Leigh Perry's Family Skeleton Goodie Bundle. Again, this is available only to US donors. The goodie bundle encompasses a whimsical hamper bundle of skeleton-themed treats featuring books and goodies from her criminally good Family Skeleton series. So the bundle features 2 Family Skeleton paperback books. The first is The Skeleton Paints a Picture and The Skeleton Makes a Friend, signed and personalized. And you also get 2 skeleton kitchen towels, a skeleton pattern bandana, a skeleton drinking straw, 1 skull guest soap, 2 skull bracelets, a dapper skeleton nightlight or scent diffuser with scent, a family skeleton microfiber wipe for glasses or touchscreens, and a skeleton crew button. So whether you're a longtime fan of Leigh's books or have a mystery-loving friend whose birthday is coming up, this is a great way to grab those bundles and to give it as a present, while also donating to support the cause to end violence against women. So there's only one of this fabulous bundle available, and it's first come, first serve. So grab it while you can. The second goodie bundle is Leigh Perry Critiques Your Work in Progress. So this is available to authors worldwide. So if you're looking for some expert feedback from an award-winning author who is equally at home with mystery, crime, and dark fantasy genres, look no further, because the fabulous Leigh is offering a chance for one generous donor to have their work in progress critiqued by Leigh. So this opportunity includes a written critique of 10,000 words of your work in progress. This can be either from a novel or a short story. A maximum of 5 follow-up questions sent over 2 emails, which Leigh has sent to you, her critique. And this is just one, there's only one of this critique bundle available, so donate now to book the slot with Leigh before it's gone. Again, just to emphasize, this is only available for English language works. So far, we've raised $3,220 towards our $5,000 goal, which is our slowest fundraiser yet. So please give generously before the fundraiser ends on the 15th of April. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to end violence against women. There are also plenty more author goodies available this week from authors and publishers including Julia Quinn, Tasha Suri, Reese Bowen, Bridget Kemmerer, Kieran Millwood Hargrave, Anna Stevens, Jody Meadows, Julie Cerneda, and Zank Books. So please give generously to help us reach our goal. Again, all our funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. I also have a slide that I would like to share with you guys. So just let me pull that up. This is essentially our links. So if you want to donate for goodies, you may do so via Rally App. The link is http://bit.ly/r4p Rally App IWD 2021. And to find out more about Read for Pixels, you can go to http://bit.ly/read for pixels. So if I believe our chat box moderators will also be sharing this on the link on the chat box. So if you can do copy and paste the link on the chat box. Yes, so to find out more as well about our violence against women work, you can visit the Pixel Project's website at www.thepixelproject.net. So that is all. That is all for our session today. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day or good night wherever you are in the world. And thank you so much, Leigh, for joining us today.
Thank you, Denise.